I mean, you have to talk about him in such a high regard. I would probably place him in probably the top five coaches of all time. I know that's a bold statement, but just because of what he's been able to do with two separate franchises, I believe he's the only head coach in NFL history to have 10 wins for two franchises in the postseason. That's incredible. He's hosted up, well, not hosted, because he fell short in Philadelphia against New England Patriots in 03 or 04, whichever year that was. But I mean, in terms of consistency, he led the Eagles to six division titles, five NFC championship games, including four consecutive from 01 to 04. He has coached a magnitude of future Hall of Fame players and has produced at a high efficiency rating in terms of making the playoffs, having good offenses, and so on and so forth. I mean, look at the list. Donovan McNabb, Michael Vick at the tail end of his career. You were able to work with Terrell Owens for that year or two. You were also able to work with Brian Westbrook, Brian Dawkins. I mean, Jason Peters. The names of these people are Hall of Fame caliber players. We all know that most of the people that I just listed are already in the Hall of Fame if they haven't been already. I mean, Donovan McNabb may kind of get in as time progresses, but Brian Dawkins in the Hall of Fame, Terrell Owens in the Hall of Fame. At some point, you can make the argument Michael Vick probably won't make it, but in terms of what he was able to bring to the game outside of Atlanta, the talent is there, the coaching pedigree is there, and then you go and you leave Philly, you go to Kansas City, and you make the playoffs with Alex Smith, who people said was washed coming off of San Francisco. Then you groom Patrick Mahomes, into which you're in the situation now. Five consecutive AFC championships, three Super Bowl appearances, one win, one loss, and you're going for the third one right now. You're going for whether a win or a loss, obviously, but you have one of the greatest, if not the greatest, quarterback prospect that has ever come into the league. You couldn't have asked for a better situation when it comes to Andy Reid. You couldn't ask for a better guy. I mean, everybody talks so highly of him in the locker room. Former players love him. It's honestly incredible to see that this man has done it for two organizations over the span of 30 some odd years, maybe even 40. And he's just won. That is what Andy Reid has done. He is a winner. Playoff appearances. Now he's got the Super Bowl championships and appearances in the Super Bowl. I think that when you talk about Andy Reid, as long as he has coached, as the players he has coached and developed, and as how they have transpired as their careers come to closes, you can't you seriously, like, look what happened to Philadelphia when he left. Yeah, Chip Kelly, that failed horribly. I don't even know who the hell came after Chip Kelly. The point is, the Eagles took a massive dive after Andy Reid left. And then you bring in Doug Peterson. They win a Super Bowl. They're in the playoffs, yada, yada, yada. And now they're back with Nick Sirianni, which is a whole other conversation for another day. Which, ironically enough, Sirianni coached for the Chiefs back in the day, and now now he's the head coach of the Eagles. And of course, Andy Reid coached the Eagles, and now he's the head coach of the Chiefs. It's kind of just like a weird flip flop here. But the narrative of what Andy Reid means to football, where he stands in terms of the all-time coaching rankings, he's got to be up there for top five, if not top 10, because I obviously know Bill Belichick is there, Vince Lombardi is there, Tom Landry is there, and a couple of other Hall of Fame coaches that I'm not going to go down the list for. But again, I think Andy Reid is one of the greatest coaches to ever, don the headset and the clipboard. But for what he's doing right now, and if he continues to do it, especially if he continues to win, he's going to continue to climb up that chart, especially in my eyes.
Yeah, for me, I wouldn't say top five. I think that's a little bit of a stretch just because he doesn't have the Super Bowl championships next to his name yet compared to some other coaches. I mean, look, Bill Belichick has, well, six as a head
Six.
coach, but he has a couple as a defensive coordinator. You could look at guys like Chuck Noll. You could look at guys like Tom Landry, Vince Lombardi. As far as I'm concerned, like all of those guys, you can make a case as some of the top five head coaches of all time. But I do think that
Right.
Andy Reid is definitely making a name for himself. Look, when you're able to bring your team to multiple Super Bowls within a relatively short period of time, in the way that Andy Reid has done, obviously these types of conversations are always going to come up. And the one thing that I can always say about Andy Reid and his ability to coach is that he's just an offensive guru. And you put him in the situation that he was placed in when he was the head coach of the Eagles, they had success with Donovan McNabb. Granted, it didn't end in Super Bowl championships, but they were competitive nonetheless, and they just fell a little bit short in that regard. And then he goes to Kansas City after 2012, being the head coach of the Eagles. And I would say the first couple years, the Chiefs were competitive. Were they winning AFC championship games? Were they going to Super Bowls before Patrick Mahomes? No, but they were still competitive. So it at least showed me that he was able to build a relatively competitive Chiefs team before Pat. And then once they got Mahomes in the draft, I mean, it's just basically it's all history now when it comes to what the Chiefs have been able to do year in and year out. Basically, before any season starts, when we do our preseason picks on who's going to win divisions or who's potentially going to compete for Super Bowls, the Chiefs are always in that discussion. And I know a lot of time we always focus on Patrick Mahomes just because he's the progenitor of the offense. He's the guy that is really pushing that offense forward. But it's Andy Reid who is coming up with those game plans, who's coming up with the play designs, who is calling the games and doing an effective job to put Patrick Mahomes and the rest of that Chiefs offense in a situation where they can win. And he's surrounded himself with a great coaching staff alongside him. To have Eric Bieniemy as his offensive coordinator, to have Steve Spagnuolo as his defensive coordinator, man, those guys, you talk about those two in particular, in their offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, those are guys that could potentially get head coaching jobs. I know Eric Bieniemy's name's been floating around for the past couple seasons to get a head coaching job. Steve Spagnuolo is always a well-respected defensive coordinator, could potentially pursue another head coaching job down the line. We'll kind of see where it goes with him. But just what Andy Reid has been able to establish and really the coaching tree that he's been able to extend from himself is phenomenal. And look, Andy Reid has an opportunity going into next week in Super Bowl 57 to display that excellence at coaching and potentially bring another Lombardi trophy home to Kansas City. And if he's able to do that, then yeah, I think a legitimate conversation can be had about him being in the top 10 of head coaches in NFL history. I think he will have earned it. And even if it doesn't work out for Casey in the Super Bowl, I think that you can make a very credible case that he's one of the best head coaches in NFL history. I'm not going to go out and say that he's the best, but he's definitely one of the best. There's no doubt about it. And if he sticks around for another couple of years and he leads Patrick Mahomes on the trajectory that Pat is on right now, we'll see where he can go. Maybe he can crack that top 5 if he can pull off a couple more Super Bowl trophies. I think that it's definitely possible. But no, Andy Reid's a great coach. And I think there's more to be had from Andy Reid's coaching career since he's only in his mid-60s. And I don't really see him slowing down anytime soon, especially when you have a quarterback like Pat. I think it makes his job a lot easier than if he were in a rebuild situation with another team. So overall, Andy Reid's a great coach. Definitely one of the best of all time. And we'll see how it goes for him in Super Bowl 57 next week.